Hey y'all, and welcome back to Dr. Mandy Unedited. I'm your host, Dr. Mandy. I am an academic editor and researcher, and this is the podcast where I teach you all about research. So, whether you are a newer researcher, you are someone who is knee deep in research and just trying to figure out all of the nooks and crannies, or if you have no care in the world for research, but you're just here because you love me, this is the podcast for you. So today we are zooming in on a key element of research that I think is quite underrated, which is the term reflexivity. Now, we've been going through the different parts of research methodology, so check out the last few episodes if you want to find out how we built up to this. But today we're going to take a look about how to be reflexive in your research and where does reflexivity fit into your dissertation or your thesis? But first, I've got some goss for you guys. So I want to talk about my recent trip to France. So, if you don't know, I am an American living in the UK, y'all, and I have had my first official European holiday since moving to the UK. This is not the first time I've traveled since living in the UK, but this is the first time that, I've taken a little break, a little adventure for myself. And so I was really excited about it. Now, I've been to France before. Some of you guys may know, you may not. Back in the day, I used to be an opera singer, and going to Europe was like the first time I got to travel outside of the US. And I did that to go and learn how to sing opera better from, some of the best people in the world, which was a really cool experience. But the thing is that when I was traveling to Europe before, I was quite young. This is like, over 10 years ago now. So I think now I have such a bigger appreciation for traveling, especially outside of the US. And yeah, it was definitely hit differently traveling to France again than it did last time. I think last time, I was definitely, not about the food, didn't really care about culture. I was just excited to be somewhere cool. And this time, like checking out all of the culture around, checking out, the good foods and the good wines, it definitely meant a lot more. So, my husband and I, I'm not an impromptu person, y'all, but he can be, okay? So I took a week off of work just to like, just to chill because I was tired. I've been working so much. And of course, my husband came up to me and was like, well, guess what? I've booked a trip to France. And so the purpose of going there was that one of our friends has just bought a house there and he wanted some help kind of, just getting the property into shape and all that good stuff. But for me, I've really been wanting to go on the ferry because there is a ferry in my town that takes you from France, from the UK to France and vice versa. So yeah, that's something that I've really been wanting to try out. So it was really nice actually getting on the ferry. You didn't have a lot of lines. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of cars. You can take your car with you. You can drive in France from the UK. So, we took our car. There wasn't a lot of lines, and I was really surprised about how easy passport control on both sides of being in the UK and France was to getting on the ferry. I mean, really, they didn't ask any questions. They just stamped the passport and we went on our merry way, which is such a relief, especially since like I have a visa, it's like I'm always worried about like, is that going to complicate things? And it wasn't a problem at all. I really liked the boat. It was, I mean, I don't know, it was really cool seeing my town from where I live, from the ocean side. And it was also, just really nice to be on, I don't know, kind of like a fancy boat. Both of the boats that we were on, they were different, but they were definitely both fancy. I've not been like on a cruise or anything before, so it was really fun, like going to the restaurants or the bars in the boat. But no, to be 100% honest with y'all, we were tired both going there and coming back, just, because I guess I have a social life now. So we rented cabins both times and slept most of the time. It took 6 hours to get to France on the ferry going there, and then on the way back, it was only 5 hours. So it's not too bad of a trip. And when we got there, we went to a little town called Mortain-Bocage, which is close to like that like Saint Michel little island that's like really famous. I didn't get a chance to stop by there. I really wish I had, but maybe next time. But we went down to a nice little camping area. This was a really cool place because they don't do like any booking or anything like that. The campsite literally just is if there's space for you to be there, then you can be there. And it was only €5 a night, which for my US friends is only about $6. And it was really great. It was so warm there. It was about 32 degrees, which is about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And yeah, it was just so clean, so quiet. Had a really nice, I don't know, I call it a bathhouse. That's not the correct term for it, but an area with, toilets, showers, places to clean your dishes. Now, we only spent a couple of days there. The first day I went to the house with the guys, just to work, because of course I accepted work. I accepted a manuscript to edit whilst I was supposed to be on holiday, y'all. But the second day was really interesting to me because I was going to just stay in the campsite. I was like waiting for people to kind of leave, so I could just kind of do my own thing. And then I was going to like walk into town and explore the town. However, I noticed that people just sat around all day in the campsite. Like, people weren't up to like go check out things. They weren't up to like, like move around, and they were just sitting and reading their books and sunning. And so, I don't know, I was just like really compelled to do that too because it was just nice, you know what I mean? The town itself, it is like a historical town. To be honest with you, I haven't looked up any of the history, but I think that there was some sort of major like battle there that the US was involved in. So I need to look a little bit more into like the history of the town. But overall, it wasn't, yeah, too much of a touristy town. But I found like the people there were really nice. A lot of the, everything was clean and beautiful. I talked about a little bit on my social media about how it reminded me a little bit of where I grew up in Virginia because there was lots of, beautiful cornfields and long stretches of road, which is something I definitely miss about the US. And another thing that was really interesting there is that a lot of people tend to just like take off time and like close down, like, their entire businesses for a couple weeks. So when we were there, it really was a little bit like a ghost town. There was only a few restaurants open. However, I don't know. I just thought like that atmosphere of just being chill, not working too hard. Of course, like this is one of the countries that also has I think they call it a pausa there, a pause in the middle of the day. I don't know. I just find all of that kind of culture where you're just not moving too fast really, really nice. So I cannot wait to go back. I'm definitely going to go back to that area. I'm definitely going to go back to France sometime soon. But yeah, that was my first official European holiday, I guess you could say. But anyway, let's get into our research topic for today. I want to talk more about some of the bits of research that are taught, if you go to a PhD program or a master's program, but maybe they're not talked about about enough in like when you actually research. And so I think reflexivity is one of those topics. So what is reflexivity? Reflexivity is the process of critically examining your own role, assumptions, and influence as a researcher. So it's not just acknowledging bias, but it's owning your position in the research and understanding how it shapes your research questions, your methods, and your interpretation. So, why does reflexivity matter? It matters in your research for, ethical reasons, rigorous reasons, and it's especially crucial in situations where you, as the researcher, may be deeply embedded into the context. So, without reflexivity, we really risk reinforcing like dominant narratives, misinterpreting, the views of participants, and pretending to be neutral when we're really anything but in research. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about how can we be reflexive in research. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about how it will appear in your dissertation or your thesis throughout your research, and then let's talk about some things that you might do beyond the research of your dissertation or your thesis to be reflexive. Okay, so first, it's just important to be as transparent as possible in research. So you will often find in papers and dissertations and theses that people will say phrases like, I didn't get to do this bit of research because I didn't have time, or they might explain how the research may have been different, with certain factors, certain limitations maybe held them back. And I find that people, especially like when I work with like peer researchers or non-academic researchers, they often ask me why these sentences, appear in the writing, because sometimes they can seem a little bit random, especially in like a shorter work, like a journal article, where you don't have as much space to explain everything as in, as you would with like, a 120-page dissertation. But yeah, you want to lay out the realities of your research. And that's what I tell people. The last thing that you want to do is make it seem like you have like the most authentic research outcomes because you left out all of these issues that you had. You didn't explain any of like the realities. You didn't explain your own perceptions. Simply put, research is just, it's not perfect, you know what I mean? We have to acknowledge that by being reflexive, by acknowledging our biases and what lens we are looking at it through, and how us as human beings are not perfect as we interpret research outcomes. So let's talk a little bit about, where in the actual writing of your dissertation does like reflexivity practices actually appear. And so you might have different sections, and of course this is different for everybody. It's not, linear throughout every single school and every single program throughout the world, but oftentimes you might have a section that you have to write called a researcher positionality. And this is just an account of who you are as a researcher. I think, like, when writing this section, it's like the most personal bit, especially like when you are spending a lot of time trying to sound super academic. This is the part where your true voice really shines through, and you're going to reflect on your background, your values, and experiences as they relate and influence your study. And writing a section like this just gives you transparency and acknowledges that you can never be like a neutral, unbiased machine. You are not a computer interpreting results. You are just simply a humanistic human being. Some other sections you might write are called, okay, look, y'all know I'm gonna mess up the pronunciations, all right, but let's talk about epistemological and ontological assumptions, okay? So these are sections that are just very short sections. A lot of times people really struggle to understand them. I'll go more in depth in them later, but in an epistemological ontological section, you are basically acknowledging that the knowledge that you are relaying in your research again is not neutral. And so you are just saying that the research will be shaped by your standpoint, your disciplinary lens, and your lived experience. And then the ontological section, again, is just going to be maybe a paragraph or two. This explains what you believe about reality. So, for example, are you coming at this research from the standpoint that you believe multiple realities exist as they are shaped by context? Or do you think that there is a reality that exists that's independent from perception? And then, of course, like reflexivity is going to be present throughout your methods section. So you'll practice it in explaining why you chose certain methods, how they align with your values, and maybe most importantly, how your presence as the researcher has influenced the data. Okay, so now we've talked about how, you might write about it in your research. Let's talk about the kind of the external factors that you might practice being reflexive throughout doing your research. So, one of the things that I like to do, especially when I start a new project, is that I keep a journal. Before every project, I write down all of my initial thoughts, and I'm not talking about like, oh, I think this topic's going to be great. I'm really excited to do it. I'm talking about, look, I write down the dirty, ugly ones that don't sound nice. Write down those like stereotypes. I know like none of us want to admit that, we do have stereotypes and prejudices towards certain things, but I mean, look, it's just what it is, isn't it? So, write down stereotypes or prejudices that you don't want to admit that you have. A lot of us probably have, especially like a lived experience about the topic that we're studying that, may have not always been the best thing in the world, may have left a bad taste in your mouth. And, for example, you go to the doctor one time, they tell you some sort of like crazy thing about, a misdiagnosis that's nothing like any of the symptoms that you have. And now you're scared of the doctor, right? You may be wary of all doctors in general. And so if you're doing research on, like doctors and how they do their practices or whatever, it's important for you to, write that down and say like, hey, yeah, I don't necessarily like doctors, but it's my duty to acknowledge that and understand how I can see past that perception and really see the realities that might be different to someone else, the realities of the doctor as well. So, yeah, I think it's important to kind of like start a journal, write down and reflect on things, thinking about why do you have these perceptions, and that might really help you open up to understand like how the reality might be different to someone else. And this is, yeah, a really great way to make yourself aware of how you are potentially affecting the research. And so, yeah, I stop and journal through various points of the research, like between choosing methodology or, even after every single participant that I interview. You may also hear this referred to sometimes as like an audit trail. And yeah, so basically, overall, you're just explaining the why behind your choices every step of the way to be transparent and help you and your future readers understand the why behind your choices every step of the way in your research. And so making that research transparent, open, and honest is what, yeah, makes your research credible. So yeah, there you have it. Research, look, it's not perfect. You're not going to do the perfect research project, and your influence in your research will be present, whether you like it or not. But it's important to acknowledge our influence in research so that we can get to a truer perception of the outcomes. So here's your food for thought today. What is an assumption that you've carried into a conversation lately? What shaped that assumption? And what might shift if you held it up to a light? You know what I mean? I think that since I have become a researcher, I really have a lot in understanding, my own input into a situation, as well as like how that might shape my view of the reality of other people, you know? Okay, so don't get too deep into it, y'all. I just thought I would mention it. But if you need some help in your research or your dissertation or your thesis, of course, Mandy is an editor and an academic coach, so feel free to reach out to me. You can do that two ways, either by going to www.drmandyedits.com, and Mandy is spelled Mandie, or you can email me at mandykf@gmail.com. So that's Mandie kangaroo foxtrot at gmail.com. If you're interested in seeing what else I do in the world, or you want to check out my social media, you can do so in the link tree below. Other than that, y'all, I know a lot of us, if you're still in school, you probably have just started, your year with your PhD, but make sure that you book yourself a little holiday, take a little time off, do something a little nice. In the meantime, I will see you later. See ya, bye.